What's up everyone, Art at Patience Metal Fab, and today we're going to be talking about a build that's been here for a while and it's still going to be here for at least a couple more months because of how extensive it is. Now sometimes we get cars that come in here and they have a very defined list. These are the 3 or the 7 things that we want to do and we can put a time frame on it. And other times we get a car that's mostly stock and then it's a dream build. We have 1,000 things that we want to do and 1,000 things that get added on while we're doing that. And this is the latter. Now what we're looking at is a Volkswagen Mark II Golf, and it's a really sentimental build for the owner. If we're talking about the base car, it's a pretty cheap economy car, but by the time this thing is said and done, it's gonna have close to 6 figures into it. So why don't we do a build breakdown while we're about halfway through, and then we'll start up a series that's gonna chronicle it all the way to the end. The first thing you're going to notice is the gorgeous engine bay in here, but I want to save that for last and talk about all the extensive modifications we've done here. What I want to do is grab Gary and have him give you the breakdown of all the little things that we've done that you might not notice right away. And there's a ton that's been done to this. How long have we had it in the shop?
Yeah, it's been in and out over the course of a couple of years. This time around, it's been here for, I don't know, probably going on 6 months.
Is that pretty typical of a car like this? Does it come in for little things and then it kind of gets amplified or ramped up?
It depends if it's a collaborative build. You know, this is collaborative between us and Further Performance. They did all the engine stuff on it. So car comes in here, we fit a lot of the stuff, car goes away, engine gets a bunch of work done, car comes back, then it'll go away again when the body stuff is ready. We'll start with kind of some of the smaller stuff here. 3-piece BBS wheel. We got the fit up established, the offset. Nice set of flares to meet it. We don't have the skirts on quite yet. Those will be going on once it goes on the lift. Again, matching flare in the back. You can see the MMP brakes that are on it, set of Wellwood calipers. And then fill point, we deleted the tank, or the filler door. Went with more of a race-inspired style filler, if you will. Speaking of the fuel filler there, it's to fill the fuel safe cell that we have in this car.
The really cool thing about this car is it's a show car and a go car, so obviously the fuel cell is an integral part of it being able to be taken to the track or really having some fun with it. The cage is the other major part. A ton of work has gone into this. Gary, can you give us a little bit of a breakdown on exactly what we've got going on?
So this is kind of your basic SCCA or NASA style cage. So he could get in some basic series with this and actually be able to go compete with the car. I doubt it ever will, based on power levels. That kind of boots him out of things, but he can certainly do some club level auto sport and some autocross type deals. So what you have is you have a basic set of down bars, main hoop, harness bar, you can see door bars, the real structure in there. You'll notice the plastic on it. That's actually because we put a brand new headliner in here, because once the cage is up and in, you can't replace the headliner.
One of the things we're known for is very tight tolerances on our cages, so I'm going to give you some up-close shots and splice them in so you guys can take a look. But it really is phenomenal how close these cages get to the top side of the car, to the doors and everything, and that's what separates us from a cheapo cage shop or even like an order and bolt-in or weld-in type cage.
So anyone that knows anything about these cars knows that those are not stock towers. Those are in there not only for a solid anchor point with the cage, but they also house a different strut than what would have been in here originally. Between that, the difference in the tunnel and the floor, this is all here because of some of the goodies underneath. Speaking of things that don't belong here, that's a Haldex all-wheel drive unit out of a R32 Volkswagen. In order to put that back here, all the modifications to the top are in there to allow us to have fabricated this custom subframe. The arms, all the mounting points, the cradle itself, all had to be designed to allow us to mount that Haldex. With the all-wheel drive swap, the cradle and everything else, there's no bolt-on exhaust system that works for this. So we fabricated a full 3-inch stainless system from the downpipe, actually from the turbo all the way back. And even though it is a stripped out race car, there's still a lot of stuff going on in here. So like Art mentioned earlier, we're known for our tight fit-ups in our cages. Our A-pillar bars touch on pretty much everywhere around the car. I mean, you can hardly get this plastic out of here the way it tucks up to the headliner. Main hoop, we bent the harness bar back a little bit in a traditional way to get the seat set back in. One thing you do notice is a lot of our cages have a little more of a elaborate door bar. These actually are straight because this is just how they fit up with the door panel. He's going to be running his original Recaros in here. The door panels match. He didn't want to do anything with the door panels. They will be cleaned up and probably reupholstered, but he wanted to keep some of the homage to the original car. So door panels, dash, that kind of stuff. That's just why these door bars look like they do. You see pretty typical basic dash bar. Nice little mount setup to run his AIM display unit. This is actually a can run unit because we're running the AIM PDM 32 channel distribution module. Works really well for cleaning things up. We like to mount our electronics on a little panel like this. Got a few auxiliary fuses, and then his ECU Masters black will also mount down there.
There's a lot of new age components that Gary described, but there's also some of the old stuff. The steering column, the dash is going to be the OEM one, so it's going to be a really cool mashup of old and new. And speaking of new and modern, these pedals here and then the shifter are the big things that stand out to me. So Gary, you want to give us a breakdown on what these are?
Yeah, basically, whenever we get this deep into a car, pedals are really limiting to give a driver the true ability to drive the car. So we go to a tilt and pedal box, a lot of adjustability in these, allows us to run different cylinders that match the brakes better that we're putting on the car. And then this is actually just the factory R32 pedal. I'm sticking with the fly-by-wire on this. It's the way to run it. We got a little adjustability built into it. The nice thing about all this stuff is the adjustability. When it's all said and done, the driver can really dial these things in to kind of cater to the feel that he wants. The other thing that brings it to the driver, really hard to miss in this, is the shifter. Any cable-driven front-wheel drive style vehicle, the shifter is the biggest factor. We know they all feel slushy and sloppy, so putting a CAE in it like this really gives them positive hard shifts. Really nice piece of equipment there.
We have a giant Willwood here in the front. That's going to be hard to miss, but it's going to be great for the braking ability of this car. After all, I said it's a show car and a go car, so it has to do both, and this setup is making that happen. This may look like a standard suspension setup, but the deeper that we go into this build, the less off-the-shelf parts that we incorporate into it. So these coilovers are from Scale Suspension. Now the fronts are an off-the-shelf unit, but the rear is a conglomeration of about 3 different cars. So we just wanted to give a shout out to them for working with us, and alongside with a number of companies that are gonna have parts on this car that we're gonna put in the description, and give those guys a shout out. Now speaking of attention to detail, you're about to get an overload in this engine bay. There's so much going on here that you really have to be in person to see all the little details. The next best thing is to have Gary describe from the engine out all the modifications that we've done so far.
Art hit it pretty much on the head. I mean, this is the heart of this whole build. The all-wheel drive is cool, the cage is cool, but this is really where it's all at. So this car originally would have had a 1.8 in it that made 75 horsepower. This motor right here is a VR6. It's a 24 valve, and this would have come out of like a 2004 R32. This motor made 240, naturally aspirated. Now, this is the Garrett 3582. This turbo is capable of upwards of 800 horse. A couple months ago when the car came back to us, there was no engine in it. Further delivered the motor, and we started to work out from there. We've got Krabby Fab header on the backside, as well as the Krabby Fab intake manifold. So once we got all the manifolds in place, we got to kind of start to build out from there. You can obviously see all the piping and everything, but it's more the small components that when you try to package them all into an engine bay like this, it gets complicated. One of the things we've run into with these Volkswagen motors is being able to run a reservoir, the necessary tanks, and everything for the cooling system to work. Not to mention, these things are known for cracking and leaking like crazy. There isn't really a great alternative to these out there. So what we came up with, we integrated in a swirl pot with its own overflow catch, crosses over to the crossover pipe in the front. It's got a thermostat housing in the bottom of it, way down there, and inlet and outlet to the radiator. So it includes everything that this box does, plus more. We eliminate reservoirs, we eliminate an overflow, all by housing it right in there. It's all in the details on this thing. We got a TurboSmart fuel pressure regulator, but one real nice feature is we hardlined the fuel line behind the motor. That way, A, we don't have soft hose back there, and B, we can tuck it back and away from the manifold in a way that gets it off the heat, and we can heat shield it.
Gary, I do have a question. Why does it say Swagen across the firewall area?
Well, like most projects, we come up with a plan, we start to implement it, and then the customer comes in and completely changes it. That actually says Volkswagen, and what it was we had this whole firewall done, nice little step in it, all smooth. We scrapped the original firewall completely, and then of course Nick brought us the tailgate from a little Rabbit truck and wanted the Volkswagen added into the firewall itself. So we took it back out, spent some time with it, and actually were able to French it in.
That custom tailgate firewall is a really cool touch, even though you can't see maybe half of it, and especially once all the components are in, but you know it's back there, and again, it aids to that attention to detail mentality in this car. And speaking of, we have this strut bar that's got a really cool design, and this is a one-off piece for this unit. I saw DJ working on this for a couple of days straight. Now, Gary, why didn't we just go out and get an aftermarket version of this?
So actually, because of everything that's in this engine bay, there's nothing available that we could have put in place. The turbo's in the way, a few other issues. Plus what we were able to do with this is actually tie this in. Now inside the car, where this mounts, there's a backer plate to reinforce it, and that will get tied into the dash bar when it's all said and done. So this further anchors the towers into the structure of the cage and just really stiffens the front end of this car up.
You can't go online and just buy that. You have to make it. Speaking of things you can't just go online and buy, we've got a really cool intake system here that is probably weeks in the making at this point. You see it starts with the filter here, and then I'll let Gary get into the air box and follow the piping along all the way to the intercooler.
We've got a custom intake system on this, starting with the air box with the integrated filter. Now we've got the top for this out for machining right now. There'll be a top and a flange, some polycarbonate. So when it's all done, you'll actually be able to see into this box with the car fully functional. We run all the vibrant tubing. We got their nice HD clamps. These things are awesome, way nicer than couplers. Running all the way through the turbo, brings us all the way down to the front of the car and into the intercooler stuff in the front. Now, like most of these little 80s cars, there's not a whole lot of room for coolers in the front of these things at all. So we've got a massive intercooler in there to support the actual horsepower. That's the first thing you get in. 3.5 inch, 24 inch wide core, custom end tanks, everything it took to get that much intercooler in the front of the car. With that mounted, then you move on to the radiator, the tranny cooler, power steering coolers, any other coolers that you need. But it takes a lot to package all this stuff into the front end.
Even though it feels like we went into pretty good detail on this walk around, we actually haven't even scratched the surface. It's really hard to get this GoPro camera and all the nooks and crannies of this car and get some good lighting and everything. But the good news is this is the first video of many on this car. Right now, all of this is gonna get torn apart and some things are gonna go to coating, some things are gonna be welded. There's a lot of finishing work yet to do, but we know that the major components are there and where they fit in the puzzle. That means in the next couple of videos, we're gonna be showing you some of those custom things like the intercooler, like the turbo setup outside of the car, and we can break it down to even more detailed descriptions and show you guys how this thing comes together. And eventually at the end of this series, this thing is gonna drive out of here with a bunch of horsepower, looking incredible, show car, go car. I keep saying that, but this is the epitome of a dream build for this customer, and we're here to make that happen. So I appreciate you guys tuning into this first video. Stay tuned for the next ones, subscribe to the page, and we'll see you in the next one.